The company's parking lot was silent in the dead of night, until Larry spotted two shadowy figures handing over bags stuffed with cash and secret files to a stranger. He crept closer, and his heart nearly stopped. The faces weren't ordinary workers, but the very people who wore masks of respect and power in broad daylight. For Larry, this was a turning point. Should he stay quiet and safe, or tear away the mask and expose a crime that could shake everything his father had built? If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. Chief Bernard was known throughout Nigeria not only as one of the wealthiest men in the country, but also as a man of wisdom and dignity. The Bernard Group of companies, with branches in nearly every major city, stood as a testament to his vision and hard work. Wherever he went, people showed him respect, not simply because of his money, but because of the way he carried himself, calm, thoughtful, and disciplined. Yet, despite all the wealth and power that surrounded him, Chief Bernard's greatest treasure was his only son. Larry had been studying medicine abroad for several years, and every time Chief Bernard thought of him, his heart filled with pride. He often spoke of Larry as a young man of intelligence and compassion, someone who would one day make his own mark in life. For Chief Bernard, Larry's success was not just about continuing the family legacy. It was about seeing his son build a name on the foundation of character rather than fortune. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the Bernard mansion, Chief Bernard sat in his study, surrounded by shelves of books and files from his vast empire. The phone rang, and on the other end was Larry, his voice filled with the excitement of finally completing his medical degree. Chief Bernard's eyes brightened with joy as he congratulated his son. But amid the celebration, he gently reminded Larry of a promise he had once made, to marry as soon as his studies were completed. "My son," Chief Bernard said warmly, "you are a doctor now, a man ready to begin the next chapter of his life. You promised me that after graduation you would find a good woman and settle down. It is time." Larry chuckled softly, but his words were firm. "Father, I remember. But you know me, I don't want a woman who sees only our wealth. I want someone who will love me for who I am, not for the Bernard name. I already have 2 women in mind from your company, but I must be sure their love is true." Chief Bernard smiled, though his voice carried both seriousness and encouragement. "It is good that you are cautious, Larry, but remember, I will always be here to guide you. If you wish, I can help point you in the right direction." Larry paused for a moment, then an idea sparked in his mind, an idea both daring and unusual. "Father," he said, "let me return home quietly, without anyone knowing. I want to work at the company, not as your son, but as an ordinary man. Let them see me without wealth or title. Only then will I know who truly deserves my heart." And so, the plan was set. Larry would return to Nigeria not in luxury, but disguised as a simple security guard in his father's company. He wanted to step into the shadows, to test the true nature of those around him. What he didn't know, however, was that beneath the polished floors and glass walls of Bernard Group, darker secrets were already at play, secrets of betrayal, greed, and crime that would soon entangle not only his search for love, but his very life. Larry returned to Nigeria quietly, his arrival known only to his father and one trusted driver. Unlike the grand homecomings the Bernard family was accustomed to, this time Larry slipped through the airport unnoticed, wearing a plain shirt and carrying a modest bag. There was no entourage, no luxury car waiting to take him away in style, just a small sedan that drove him straight to the staff quarters near one of the Bernard Group branches. The next morning, Larry stood in front of the mirror, dressed not in a doctor's coat or an expensive suit, but in a faded blue security uniform. His reflection made him smile. He looked nothing like the heir to a billion-dollar empire. He looked ordinary, almost invisible. That was exactly what he wanted. If anyone would love him now, it would not be for the money or name, but for the man behind the disguise. His first day on the job was filled with curious stares from the other staff. Some ignored him completely, while others whispered about the new guard. Larry, however, was not there to impress them. He was there to observe. And soon, 2 women caught his attention. The first was Sandra, a quiet, graceful young woman who worked in administration. She was known for her humility and kindness. When she saw Larry standing outside in the blazing sun, she smiled warmly and handed him a cold bottle of water. "You must be tired," she said softly. "Don't forget to stay hydrated." Larry's heart warmed at her sincerity. She had no reason to show kindness to a mere guard, yet she did so without hesitation. The second was Jessica, elegant, stylish, and full of confidence. She walked past Larry as if he were invisible. Not once did she greet him, though she often turned to her friends to boast loudly. "You know," Jessica said with a smirk, "very soon I will be the daughter-in-law of Chief Bernard. All this will be mine." She carried herself as though the future was already written, her arrogance filling the office like perfume that lingered too long. Larry found it amusing. The difference between Sandra's gentle smile and Jessica's proud demeanor was striking. Yet he said nothing. He continued to play his part, standing at the gate, watching, listening, learning. But as he blended into the background, Larry began to notice something strange. Late at night, long after the office lights had dimmed, certain employees would slip into the building. Papers were shuffled, drawers opened, and whispers exchanged. One evening, he saw a man, someone he recognized as a mid-level manager, meeting a stranger in the parking lot. In the shadows, a file and an envelope of cash changed hands. Larry's heart tightened. This was no ordinary workplace. Something criminal was brewing within the walls of his father's company, and if he wasn't careful, his disguise might lead him straight into danger. For now, he remained silent, determined to watch and wait. But deep inside, he knew one truth. This game he had started to find true love was about to become much more dangerous than he had ever imagined. As days passed, Larry settled into his role as the silent guard at the Bernard Group office. He had grown used to the curious glances of the employees and their dismissive whispers, but he never forgot his true mission, to find out which woman could love him for who he really was. Sandra continued to stand out. She greeted him every morning with kindness, sometimes offering him a small snack or a word of encouragement. For her, it seemed natural to treat everyone with respect, whether they were a manager or a guard. Larry found himself looking forward to those brief encounters. Her sincerity like a fresh breeze in the often suffocating environment of the office. Jessica, on the other hand, became more arrogant with each passing day. She strutted through the hallways like a queen already crowned. Whenever Chief Bernard's name came up, she smiled smugly and told her colleagues, "Just wait. Very soon I will be Mrs. Larry Bernard. When that happens, you all will see who holds the real power here." Many employees laughed behind her back, but no one dared to challenge her directly. Jessica's confidence came from her belief that she had a special connection to the Bernard family. But the truth was far darker than anyone realized. One late afternoon, while making his usual rounds, Larry stopped near the side entrance of the building. Voices drifted through the partially open door. He recognized one immediately, Jessica's. Inside, she stood with Mr. Raymond, a senior manager in his father's company. Larry listened carefully, his body tense. "Everything is working perfectly," Jessica said, her tone sharp and businesslike, so unlike the sweet, charming face she showed to others. "Once we move this money out of the account, Chief Bernard won't even notice until it's too late. And when I marry his son, it won't matter. I'll control everything anyway." Mr. Raymond gave a low chuckle. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jessica. But I like your ambition. The files we took last night are ready. Tomorrow I'll have them delivered." Larry froze in place. His mind raced. So it was true. Crimes were happening inside his father's empire, and Jessica was directly involved. She wasn't just arrogant. She was dangerous. He wanted to storm in and confront them, to reveal who he really was. But instinct held him back. If he revealed himself too soon, not only would his plan to test true love be ruined, but Jessica and Raymond might find a way to destroy the evidence before his father could know the truth. Larry stepped back into the shadows, his heart pounding. The game had changed. What began as a search for genuine love had now become a silent investigation into betrayal and greed. As he walked back to his post, Sandra appeared, smiling gently as she offered him another bottle of water. Larry forced a smile in return, but his thoughts were far away. Could Sandra ever imagine the secrets he now carried? Could she withstand the storm that was about to break over the company? One thing was certain. Larry was no longer just looking for love. He was standing at the center of a criminal conspiracy that could destroy everything his father had built. The Bernard Group office buzzed with its usual rhythm, but Larry sensed the undercurrent of tension growing stronger each day. Ever since overhearing Jessica and Mr. Raymond's conversation, his mind had been on edge. He could no longer look at Jessica the same way. Behind her flawless clothes and elegant smile hid the cold greed of a woman willing to betray everything for power. Yet amid the shadows of suspicion, Sandra's light shone brighter. She never treated Larry like an outsider. When the sun was merciless, she would hand him a bottle of cold water. On rainy mornings, she would pause to ask if he needed shelter. Her kindness wasn't dramatic. It was simple, natural, and real. Larry found comfort in her presence. One afternoon, heavy rain poured across the city. Larry stood at the gate, his uniform soaked through. As he tried to brush the water from his face, Sandra appeared with an umbrella. She walked straight into the rain, her clothes partly wet, just to shield him. "You'll get sick out here," she said softly, her eyes full of concern. Larry's heart stirred. This was the sincerity he had always longed for. But kindness was not the only thing moving quietly through the company. Behind closed doors, something darker was happening. The accounts department reported missing funds. A few important files vanished overnight. Chief Bernard, furious at the repeated thefts, ordered a full internal investigation. The next morning, an announcement echoed through the office. "Until we find the culprit, no one is above suspicion," employees whispered nervously in the corridors. Rumors spread like fire. To Larry's shock, the very first person to fall under suspicion was him, the new security guard. Someone had planted evidence near his small locker, copies of documents that had been stolen. When the head of security confronted him, Larry could only stare in disbelief. "I don't know how these got there," he protested. But to the others, it looked like a simple case. A poor guard, tempted by wealth, steals for quick cash. Jessica was quick to seize the moment. Standing before her colleagues, she smirked and said, "I knew from the start something was wrong with him. He always looked too curious for a simple guard. Perhaps he thought he could outsmart us, but look where it got him." Her words spread doubt like poison. Sandra, however, stood firmly by his side. "No," she said with quiet determination. "I don't believe it. He may be poor, but he is not a thief. His eyes don't lie." Larry felt a rush of gratitude for her faith, even as the walls seemed to close in around him. He wanted to reveal his true identity then and there to clear his name instantly. But he knew the time wasn't right. Somewhere in the building, Jessica and Raymond were celebrating their clever move. They had framed Larry perfectly, removing suspicion from themselves. But what they didn't realize was this. Larry wasn't just a guard. He was Chief Bernard's son, and he was watching, waiting, and silently gathering everything he needed to bring them down. The storm inside the Bernard Group was only growing. Though many believed the new security guard was the thief, Sandra's open defense of Larry unsettled Jessica. The more Jessica noticed Sandra standing by him, the more threatened she felt. To her, Sandra was nothing but competition, a barrier between her and the wealthy future she had already claimed as her own. One evening, as the office emptied, Jessica cornered Larry near the back gate. Her sharp heels echoed against the pavement, her eyes gleaming with calculated menace. "Listen carefully," she hissed. "I know you're getting close to Sandra. Break it off. If you don't, I will make sure you lose everything, even this petty job you cling to." Larry stayed silent, his calmness infuriating her. He knew that reacting would only expose more than he wanted to reveal. Jessica leaned closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't belong here. You're nothing. If you think you can compete with me, you're a fool. Remember, I can destroy you with just one word to Chief Bernard." But behind the arrogance of her threat, Larry sensed fear. Why would she be so desperate to keep him away from Sandra? Unless She was hiding something even bigger. Later that week, Sandra noticed a cleaner lingering unusually close whenever she and Larry exchanged a few words. At first, she thought little of it, but soon realized the woman was deliberately eavesdropping. When confronted, the cleaner confessed in a low voice, "Miss Jessica pays me to watch you both. She doesn't trust you." The revelation only confirmed what Larry already suspected. Jessica's obsession was spiraling into something dangerous. That night, determined to uncover the truth, Larry decided to follow Raymond. He had seen him leaving the building after hours too many times to dismiss as a coincidence. From a distance, he trailed Raymond into a dark alley near the industrial district. Hidden behind a stack of crates, Larry's heart pounded as he watched. There they were, Raymond and Jessica, their faces tense but hungry with ambition. Jessica clutched a folder tightly, while Raymond counted a thick bundle of cash handed over by a stranger. "This is just the beginning," Raymond muttered. "Once the accounts are completely drained, we'll disappear before anyone knows what happened." Jessica smirked, her arrogance even more chilling under the dim streetlight. "And by then I'll have my place secured as the Bernard daughter-in-law." "Who would dare accuse me?" Larry's fists clenched. Every word was a dagger. He now had confirmation. They were the true criminals, the ones betraying his father's empire. But before he could slip away unnoticed, a sudden noise betrayed his presence. A bottle rolled across the pavement, drawing their attention. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Who's there?" she demanded, stepping closer. In a heartbeat, Raymond lunged forward, catching a glimpse of Larry's uniform. "It's him!" Raymond spat. "The guard!" Jessica's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Perfect. If he dares open his mouth, no one will believe him. Tomorrow we'll frame him completely." Larry retreated into the shadows, his heart racing. He had discovered their darkest secret, but now he knew. Jessica and Raymond would stop at nothing to silence him. The battle lines were drawn. The next morning, the Bernard mansion was buzzing with an unusual energy. Chief Bernard had invited both Sandra and Jessica for what he described as an important family discussion. Neither woman knew the reason, but Jessica entered with her usual smugness, convinced she was about to be announced as Larry's fiancée. Sandra, on the other hand, came with hesitation, uncertain why she had been summoned. Inside the grand hall, Chief Bernard sat regally in his armchair, his piercing gaze fixed on them both. "You must be wondering why I called you here," he began, his deep voice filling the room. "But before I speak, there is someone you both need to meet properly." At his signal, the heavy double doors swung open. A man stepped inside, tall, confident, and no longer in the faded blue uniform of a guard. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his presence commanding. Sandra's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. Jessica's smug smile slowly faded into confusion, then shock. Chief Bernard rose to his feet with pride. "Meet my son, Dr. Larry Bernard." The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra stared, her mind racing to process the truth. The kind, humble guard she had befriended was the heir to the Bernard empire. Jessica, however, nearly lost her balance. "What?" she gasped. "He's your son?" Larry's eyes swept across the room, resting first on Sandra, then on Jessica. His voice was calm, but laced with disappointment. "Yes, I am Larry Bernard. I disguised myself as a guard because I wanted to see who would value me for who I am, not my father's wealth." Sandra's hand trembled slightly, but her heart swelled with emotion. Every act of kindness she had shown had been genuine, never once imagining his true identity. Jessica, meanwhile, felt her world collapsing. She remembered every insult, every arrogant dismissal she had thrown at him, and realized the man she had scorned was the very one she had desperately hoped to marry. "No, this can't be true," Jessica cried, her voice breaking. "You tricked us. Enough!" Chief Bernard thundered, his patience snapping. His eyes narrowed at Jessica. "It was not a trick. It was a test. And sadly, your true nature has been exposed." Larry stepped closer, his gaze steady on Jessica. "I know everything about you and Raymond. About the money you've stolen, the late-night meetings, the betrayal. I heard it with my own ears." Jessica froze, her blood turning to ice. You're lying," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Chief Bernard's expression darkened further. Is he? Because my investigators found the same evidence this morning. You and Raymond thought you could fool me, but your greed has destroyed you. Sandra looked at Jessica with quiet pity, while Jessica's arrogance crumbled into desperation. Please, Chief Bernard. You don't understand. It was Raymond. He forced me into this. But it was too late. Guards stepped forward on Bernard's command, ready to escort Jessica away. The once proud woman who dreamed of becoming the boss's daughter-in-law was now reduced to a trembling figure, begging for mercy. As Jessica was dragged out, Larry turned to Sandra. His voice softened. Sandra, I only have one question. Will you stand by me, not as the son of Chief Bernard, but simply as Larry, the man who loves you? Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile shone through. Yes, Larry, that's all I ever wanted. In that moment, the mansion filled with relief and warmth. But outside, Jessica's screams echoed in the distance, a chilling reminder that greed and betrayal always carry a price. The Bernard Empire stood at the edge of chaos. Yet for the first time in months, there was clarity. The truth was out. Raymond's shadowy dealings had been uncovered, and Jessica's manipulations exposed. But the storm hadn't passed quietly. It had torn through reputations, friendships, and loyalties, leaving behind only the raw consequences of greed and betrayal. Raymond's attempt to flee the country was his final mistake. Authorities caught him at the airport, sweat dripping from his brow as he tried to wheel away a suitcase packed with bundles of stolen cash and incriminating documents. His arrest sent shockwaves through the business community. A man once trusted with the inner workings of the Bernard Group was now paraded as a criminal. His charges, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy, were enough to ensure years behind bars. For all his cunning, Raymond had underestimated the one thing he could never escape: justice. Jessica's collapse, however, was a different kind of punishment. Her fall from grace was public, humiliating, and merciless. Colleagues who once laughed at her jokes and followed her lead now avoided her as though she carried a disease. Every whisper in the office carried her name, but not with admiration, only pity and disdain. Her arrogance had painted her as untouchable, yet now she was reduced to begging for mercy. She pleaded with Chief Bernard, claiming she had been misled by Raymond, but her words fell on deaf ears. The evidence was overwhelming, and worse, her own pride had betrayed her. Chief Bernard was not a man who tolerated deceit. Watching Jessica's desperate attempts to shift blame, he finally spoke with a voice that echoed finality. You had every chance to prove your worth, he said coldly. Instead, you chose greed. Now live with the consequences. The company quickly moved forward, though scars remained. Bernard Group employees felt relief knowing the rot had been cut out. Yet whispers lingered in the hallways about the young heir who had disguised himself as a security guard to unmask traitors within his own family's empire. Larry's secret had become a legend almost overnight, admired by workers who saw him as more than just the son of wealth. He had proven his wisdom, humility, and courage. But for Larry, the greatest victory wasn't the company's safety. It was the love he had found. Sandra had remained by his side through the storm, her kindness unshaken even when the truth of his identity came crashing down. She had loved the man in the faded uniform, not the heir in the expensive suit. And that truth gave Larry more comfort than all his father's wealth combined. One evening, in the Bernard mansion's sprawling garden, Larry decided it was time to take the step that had been building in his heart. The garden was strung with lanterns, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine, and close family and trusted friends gathered in quiet anticipation. Chief Bernard stood tall at the edge of the gathering, his eyes glistening with pride. Larry walked to the center, where Sandra stood in a simple yet elegant dress, her face glowing in the soft light. His heart pounded, but his resolve was firm. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee, his voice trembled but carried the weight of every emotion he had ever felt for her. Sandra, he began, his eyes locked on hers. You saw me when I was nothing more than a man in a worn-out uniform. You gave me kindness when others gave me scorn. You respected me when others ignored me. You loved me for who I was, not for the name I carried. That love is the most precious gift I will ever receive. Tonight I ask, will you marry me not as the son of Chief Bernard, but as Larry, the man who belongs to you?" Sandra's eyes brimmed with tears, her lips trembling as she nodded. "Yes, Larry," she whispered, her voice breaking with joy. 1,000 times, yes. The garden erupted in cheers, laughter, and applause. Chief Bernard clapped his hands together, tears slipping down his face, despite his efforts to remain stoic. The guests rejoiced, witnessing not just a proposal, but a story that had defied wealth, betrayal, and deception. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for a wedding that became the talk of the city. Unlike the usual displays of wealth that accompanied such events, Larry and Sandra insisted on something different, something that reflected their journey. The wedding was grand yet grounded, elegant yet simple. Every detail spoke of authenticity rather than extravagance. On the wedding day, Sandra walked down the aisle radiant in her gown, not as a woman dazzled by riches, but as someone whose heart had been chosen for the truth it carried. Larry waited at the altar, his eyes fixed only on her, their smiles mirroring the love that had carried them through trials. The ceremony was emotional, filled with vows that drew tears from everyone present. When Larry and Sandra finally sealed their love with a kiss, the hall erupted in celebration. It was a moment that symbolized not just the union of two souls, but the triumph of honesty over deception, humility over arrogance, and love over greed. Meanwhile, Jessica and Raymond's story became a cautionary tale whispered across the city. Their names, once associated with ambition, were now stained with disgrace. Their trials ended with heavy prison sentences, ensuring they would never again hold power over others' lives. To many, their fate was a reminder that greed can offer temporary glory, but it always leads to ruin. For Larry and Sandra, life had only just begun. Their marriage wasn't the end of their story, but the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of building something real together. And as Chief Bernard looked at them with pride, he knew his empire was not only secure in business, but safe in the hands of a son who valued truth above all else. The story of Larry and Sandra lived on, not merely as a romance, but as a legend, a thrilling reminder that love, integrity, and courage can withstand even the darkest of storms.